Well, to talk to us a little bit more about this, we're now joined by African Affairs analyst, Advocate Sipho Mantula. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Brad Pitt and Jumbo Africa to the viewers.
So, UNGA 76 is now in session, and the big voices of the world were heard today. UN Secretary General and the President of the United States, as expected. What did you hear about Africa that raised your concern or your attention?
Brother Peter, this is very important, as we are aware that Africa goes to this UNGA for the first time since COVID-19 erupted last year. And when you look at Africa, the issues of conflict that are in in the northern part of Ethiopia, the crisis that just have happened in Sudan, attempted coup, those are the issues when you look at the pillars of UNGA, that issues of peace, security, human rights, development are key. And if one looks at the theme, they were supposed to break down that theme very well, Peter, because you have the 6 R's there. And the first R, when you talk of reform, revitalization of the UN Security Council, that has been the cry of Africa. The second aspect is how do we even deal with respect of the rights of African people globally, considering the vaccine hoarding, or what we call vaccine public relations that has been going on. And another aspect that is key, Peter, I think, as you are aware that tomorrow they will be talking about the Durban Plan of Action, the KwaZulu-Natal second decade, the 20 years of the Durban Declaration on issues of racism, xenophobia, and the same USA president who's sitting and being the first one to can speak and to whistle. He was there to correct the errors of Trump, in some instance. But America knows very well that they walked out of that Durban conference with other superpowers. So if one looks at the opening of UNGA, it is that, yes, the post-COVID recovery for Africa, it will be a steep challenge. And we know that we have the new African leaders who are, for the first time, going to be speaking at that assembly.
All right, and we'll talk about that just now. But you did mention President Biden spoke about troubled spots in the country. He talked about Yemen and also Tigray, northern Ethiopia. And this is what he had to say. Let's listen.
We cannot give up on solving raging civil conflicts, including in Ethiopia and Yemen. We're fighting between warring parties is driving famine, horrific violence, human rights violations against civilians, including the unconscionable use of rape as a weapon of war. We'll continue to work with the international community to press for peace and bring an end to this suffering. As we pursue diplomacy across the board, the United States will champion the democratic values that go to the very heart of who we are as a nation and a people. Freedom, equality, opportunity, and a belief in the universal rights of all people. It's stamped into our DNA as a nation, and critically, it's stamped into the DNA of this institution, the United States. We sometimes forget, I quote the opening words of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, quote, "The equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world."
All right, so that's President Joe Biden in an address. And you did mention Tigray. He's imposed or agreed, indicated that certain individuals will have sanctions put upon them in this conflict in Tigray. Is that about as much as he can do, as much as America can do? What else might he say at this UNGA, or is that it?
Peter, for me, it is shocking because it is the same script that all American leaders, when they have to deal with African conflicts, they will think that they have got a panacea or a remedy, when actually I would have thought that you will have looked at the UN Charter that like I've said, the appeal of the UN Charter, and one of the key principle is to always save succeeding generation from the scourges of war. And the USA has been involved in Kabul, Afghanistan, Somalia. We find that USA has been meddling with African conflict hotspot. And now they are coming as the holy angels before the UN General Assembly, when we know very well that even Security Council veto power, USA, it is still wielding power there. And it was critical for him not to do the issue that you raised, bit of sanctions. Others will call them either stupid sanctions or strategic sanctions that will deal with the leaders. You will see that there is a challenge, not only in Ethiopia. We saw the challenge in Mali. We saw the challenge in Guinea-Conakry. And those are the issues of natural resources that even the superpowers are still having appetite towards African continent. And that's where one looks at how America wants to absolve itself. The issues of human rights, Peter, are critical. The racism, the Black Lives Matters that have been going on in that country, they should have dealt with them and not to give us the same script to be saying only sanctions will end that conflict that has been going on in the northern part of Ethiopia.
What can the United Nations as a group of nations do about the situation in Tigray? There's a humanitarian crisis that's growing day by day. And we've seen the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed digging in his heels, basically telling President Biden to mind his own business.
Correctly, Peter, because we have the African Union Peace and Security Council architect that is engaging with the UN Security Council. The key issue here, Peter, is that you might have the role of Eritrea, you might have the role of Tigrayan People's Liberation Front that has been compounding this current conflict. And at the same time, I think that, as we know, Peter, last year, Africa was talking about silencing of guns. But we don't see this concept, African countries taking it seriously when they go to the United Nations Security Council. Hence, earlier I spoke about erupting conflicts that are now beginning in Khartoum, Conakry, and as well Mozambique. That is also one of the critical areas. And that's why when we have to look at the African solutions, we need to stick to our principles of how do we deal with the conflict resolutions in our African context. And hence, as I said, the role of the superpowers, it is all about to interfere and to meddle. What the UN can do, Peter, I can tell you, China has got appetite. If you look at the architect of the UN, there's a unit that we call Department of Peace, the peacekeeping operations. That is the engine of the UN when you talk of the peacekeeping missions. And that's where we need to tighten Africa's voice in African conflicts in that unit. And as well as this issue of us having only the 3 non-permanent seats on the UN Security Council makes us a mockery and a facade of how Africa it has been treated, even after so many years after the UN was formed.
Guinea, Mali, these are countries being run by military juntas. In another country in the world, perhaps more urgency would be applied. Will this even get debated at the United Nations?
Probably, Peter, if the Africa bloc, ECOWAS, and the AU, they are able to can think deeply about the issues of constitutional restoration in Guinea, in Mali, because again, Peter, we've got natural resources that the superpowers and the bigger countries are still having appetite on them. So if we don't defend the issues that, as you said, the military juntas, others they call them the freedom fighters, Peter, in those countries. Mumbai, Asamia Goita, they have been called liberators. But if you look at the issues that I have raised, the Peace and Security Council architect must include civilian role. The challenges that faces the youth in the African continent, the Agenda 2063, must be brought at UNGA, Peter, because Africa cannot look back. The Africa continental free trade, Peter, could be benefiting on issues of this COVID-19 facilities, but we are not. Actually, we are the victims. Hence, I raised that the conflicts that have been simmering in Guinea-Conakry, in Mali as well, you find that the superpowers who are in the Security Council have been working behind the scenes. Like we know very well, China has got an economic interest in Guinea-Conakry. And that's what Nkrumah warns us about, African natural resources, that the superpowers will always loot at them and they will say Africa is poor, when actually it's the African minds that are leading us into this ditch.
And then perhaps finally, there are a few new presidents from Africa that are going to be attending for the first time. And one of them, Hakainde Hichilema, took a commercial flight with a very small delegation. Is he pointing to a new possibility in terms of our African leaders carry themselves? Others, sadly, will go with their full, huge entourages. But I guess that's a sign maybe that the old ways are giving way to the new ways?
Correct, Peter. But remember, Zambia is having budgetary constraints as well, Peter, for him to go with that small team. But again, I think it is a sign that there's a focus, because they're saying smaller countries, Peter, are going to UNGA just to meet with the bigger powers and the bigger countries. Interestingly, Samia Suluhu from Tanzania, Peter, for 5 years, Tanzania has not been going to UNGA. This is another woman from even Tanzania who will be part of UNGA. But for Zambia to go there, Peter, again, it is because of the new fresh air that has been blowing around Zambia, Lusaka, and as well to pass the message after the passing of Dr. Kenneth Kaunda this year. So it's very critical. We see Chakwera going under the banner of SADC, but Malawi, it is still in the radar. It is still in the woods. So we don't know what will be their message, because the UN will want them to deal with those issues that I have raised, Peter, earlier, the post-COVID recovery, the issues around, one can say, restoration of rights, and even for them, the SADC, the AU, under the chairperson of Tshisekedi as well, Peter, they need to assure the issue of the reform of the UN system, because I think this has been a sermon, and we've been preaching about the UN reform, Peter. It is good for the leaders to go there, because President Ramaphosa will only be visual, but we need even South Africa to be very firm on their role at the UN, because we are contributing a lot of money in the UN agencies, Peter. So it is a very, one can say, refreshing move from Zambia to be sending a small delegation. We know other African countries, Peter, they are doing wasteful expenditure by sending entourage. And people, when they come back, Peter, there's no what we call a feedback, or to give us implementation of how do we improve the lives of our ordinary people.
Advocate Sipho Mantula, always good talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us and your insights this evening.
Asante sana, brother Peter.
Asante, karibu.